We are 4 games into the Stanley Cup Finals, and it's time we take a hard look at the lessons the Nashville Predators need to learn from the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Monday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us Monday through Friday. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
Yes, you do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, we are going to lean into the truth that if you want to be a champion, you have to study the champions. That's exactly what Emma and I are going to do on today's show. We are going to take a closer look at the Stanley Cup final series so far, at the Florida Panthers, at the Edmonton Oilers, and tell you what the Nashville Predators need to learn and do to get back to cup contention. But before we dive into all that juicy good stuff, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to learn more. All right, Emma, so we are 4 games into kind of a wild Stanley Cup final. I think game 4 threw everybody for a loop. What do you think so far, just overall, of this final series?
To be honest, I kind of had a feeling that a game like game 4 was bound to happen the way that the series started. Now, I wasn't expecting 8-1. I was expecting maybe like 5-1 or
there
something.
There you
go. That was a lot. But, I think that, and understandably, everyone was very excited now that Edmonton's like, oh, we've got a series now. It's like, we do, it's true. But I think that Florida, as much as my heart would love to see Mattias Ekholm, as much as I would love to see Mattias Ekholm lift the Stanley Cup, I don't know if this is their year. Florida, just top to bottom, has been the better team. Game 4 notwithstanding.
Right.
Again, even good teams have bad games, and that was a bad game for Florida. And, with how dominant they've been throughout the playoffs, and especially this series, like I said, bound to happen. I still, I think that they entering, they were the team to beat, and I still believe that.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I feel like Florida has been so dominant in a lot of ways in this series. And I feel like Edmonton just poked the bear. Like, yes, you won by a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. You scored that many. That's fantastic. But you also just really ticked them off. And they're mad and they're going home. And they feel like they have let Sergei Bobrovsky down, and you have poked the bear. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game 5. Again, though, you look back at the regular season, Edmonton has been very good when they've lost 3 games consecutively. And I wish I could recall who tweeted this because I don't want to take credit for it. But I did see on Twitter that like their record coming back in the regular season when they've lost 3 consecutive games is very, very good. So can they do it again? We're going to have to wait and see in game 5. But I think we have a lot of takeaways that we can learn from these first 4 games, even though, the series looks unbalanced with Florida up 3-1. There's still a lot of takeaway and a lot that Nashville needs to pay close attention to if they want to quickly get back to some sort of cup contention. And for me, and I think for you, we just talked so briefly about this ahead of recording, but goaltending Friends, you can say what you want to say, but goaltending matters. And I think we've learned that in this series. Sergei Bobrovsky had a .954 save percentage going into game 4. Game 4 was not his very best game. Sergei just decided to just take some time off, ended up with a .688 save percentage. Bless his heart. But Bobrovsky has been phenomenal. Edmonton led in expected goals for in games 1 and 3, but lost. And some of those, high danger chances that Edmonton, they created, Bobrovsky was having none of it. And I think you have to take a minute and talk about goaltending when it comes to becoming a cup champion or becoming a team that is a serious contender for the Stanley Cup. Goaltending matters.
Yes, and that is something that I see a lot of people arguing when it comes to the Nashville Predators and it comes to the whole trade Juuse Saros. You don't need elite goaltending to win the Stanley Cup. No, that's not the only thing that's going to win you a Stanley Cup.
Correct.
However, you have to look at the matchup here because, yes, Sergei Bobrovsky has been amazing. Look who he's been amazing against. The best player in the league, arguably. And Connor McDavid, and then Leon Draisaitl as well. Zach Hyman was a 50-goal scorer. I mean, all these guys. That, when you're playing against a team like that, that is when goaltending matters so much. And I think that, granted, I think in game 4, I can't remember if it was the first 3 goals or first 4 goals or something like that Edmonton scored were all off the rush. So it's like they finally figured that out. And it's like, oh, if we keep doing this, then the puck finds its way into the back of the net. Crazy. But I think that that's where, like I said, where goaltending matters. Goaltending alone is not going to win you a Stanley Cup. I am not arguing that, but I think when you're playing against literally the best players in the world, that's when it matters. The best offensive players in the world, that's when it matters.
Yes. And you have to be prepared to face the best offensive players in the world in the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, does that always happen? No, it doesn't always happen, but you've got to be prepared for the best team in the league in net. And I agree with you. You hear this, especially around Nashville about Juuse Saros. Do you really need Juuse Saros? You can get by. Look at, Colorado, look at, Vegas. They don't have these outstanding goaltenders and they can make a deep playoff run. Well, you can. And I agree with you. I think you make a great point. You're not going to win a Stanley Cup solely on excellent goaltending. You're not. But excellent goaltending is going to keep a series short and keep a series close. And when you get to the Stanley Cup final, those are your best hopes. You want it to be a short series and you want it to be a close series. And goaltending is going to be the thing that makes that difference. Now, my question for you, Emma, is I was looking at Florida on Cap Friendly, which we all know is going away. That's a whole thing. But
RIP.
Oh, gosh. RIP. We'll say the best things at the funeral. Sergei Bobrovsky makes $10 million. He's on contract for the next 2 seasons. If you knew that your goaltender was going to be a difference maker in the way that I feel like Bobrovsky, even with game 4, he has been a difference maker in this series for Florida, would you pay a goaltender that much? Does this change what you would say, let's offer Juuse Saros this amount, knowing what they pay Bobrovsky and what he's done?
I'm not paying Saros $10 million a year purely because Saros, you want to sign Saros for longer than 2 years. Right. So that's why and theoretically your window, like this is Florida's window and this is kind of the end of their window because they're going to have a lot of free agents after this season. This is kind of their chance. So it's like, this is it. If you're going to throw money at something, you can't take it with you. So let's do that. And I know Bobrovsky was on a longer contract than that, but if you're looking at signing Saros to, I don't know, an 7-year, 8-year deal, I'm not paying him that much.
Right.
But I do think that you gotta understand how valuable he is to your team, especially a team that has been so defense heavy. And so like that's really just kind of been built on elite goaltending. And so I think that's I don't know that I'm going to get into the double digits there and pay him 10
Right.
million, but I mean, yeah, I think it does show for me. There's been a lot of talk about how either Bobrovsky or Sasha Barkov will win the Conn Smythe this year. And after game 4, again, not Bobrovsky's finest hour. That's okay. But now people are saying, oh, he shouldn't win the Conn Smythe anymore. Personally, I still think he should. I'm
I
not
agree.
gonna be mad if Barkov wins it, because Barkov has also been extremely valuable to his team in this final, or really the whole playoffs. But Bobrovsky to me has been the most valuable player on that
Yes.
team. So
I agree with you.
I still think he should win the Conn Smythe.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Juuse Saros in a contract, because I do think that there is a portion of the Nashville Predators fan base that, regardless of the number and the term, are not going to like re-signing Saros because they feel like you've wasted a valuable trade piece. But for me, if you can re-sign Juuse Saros for even 6-7 years, and I understand that you have Yaroslav Askarov, and yes, I think you keep them both. I don't know how to say it in Spanish, but I think you keep them both.
¿Por qué
But
no los dos?
¿por qué no las dos?
There you go. See,
Look
you
at
got
this.
it. Look at
¿Por
you.
qué
You're
no las
bilingual.
dos?
Love it.
But I think, you know what? The Predators window is going to be 6-7 years. And I think you want a really good goaltender with experience in net. And while Juuse Saros, people have said, well, he's not been great in the postseason. Well, he hasn't had great teams with him in the postseason either. I mean, let's just call it what it is. So for me, I'm here for paying the money to have that experienced, valuable, high quality goaltender in net for whenever that window opens. And I believe you can sign Juuse Saros to a contract where he will be ready when that opens up. So for me, goaltending has mattered in this series, and goaltending will matter for Nashville to get back into contention. Coming up, Emma and I are going to talk about a couple of other things we feel like Nashville really needs to pay attention to as they work to get back to Cup contenders. What do we learn about the stars and the supporting cast, and how important is timing? We're going to talk about that coming up in just a minute. First, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Policy Genius. A lot of life, like hockey, is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of those unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right, Emma, we are talking about lessons that the Nashville Predators need to learn from the Stanley Cup final series so far if they want to get back into Cup contention. Let's talk about the stars and the supporting cast. What is your takeaway as you look at the performances from the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers that Nashville needs to look at, maybe even as soon as this offseason?
So this has been the biggest takeaway for me of this entire Stanley Cup final. When I look at what these teams have, specifically what the Florida Panthers have and what the Predators do not have,
Come on.
balanced scoring. You have a balanced attack. Yes, Edmonton has Connor McDavid. And it's easy to look at a team like that and be like, well, the Predators don't have McDavid. So, of course, they can't be a contender or whatever it is. We've seen now that McDavid alone isn't going to drag you to a Stanley Cup because it took him until game 4 to score his first goal of the Stanley Cup final. And so meanwhile, you look at Florida, they have 9 different skaters with 10 or more points in the playoffs so far.
That's incredible.
That's incredible. They lead all playoff teams in that category. I mean, understandably. And another thing that I find interesting is that if you look back, each of the last 5 Stanley Cup champions before this year finished with at least 8 different skaters who had 10 or more points in the playoffs. So kind of a pattern that maybe you need a balanced scoring attack. And I think that, and even again, that's mostly for Florida. Now you look at Edmonton and they obviously had a dominant performance in game 4. Same thing. 15 different Oilers players made it onto the score sheet in game 4.
That's how you win games.
Balanced attack.
Yep.
Meanwhile, if you want to take a look at the Nashville Predators, I'm not going to look at the playoff stats because it was a shorter run.
It was.
And not as indicative, I think, of the point I'm trying to make here. So if we look at the regular season for the Nashville Predators, you got more than 50% of your points the entire season from 4 guys. 4 guys. And then after that 4, so it's Philip Forsberg, Roman Josi, Gus Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly. After O'Reilly, there is a significant drop-off, like a 24-point drop-off into the next guy on the list, and that would be Tommy Novak. So if your top players, again, Forsberg, Josi, Nyquist, O'Reilly, 94 points, 85 points, 75 points, 69 points, and then whoop, big drop off, and it goes down to Tommy Novak at 45 points. And then you got Evangelista 39, Sissons 35. So I think that illustrates pretty clearly that you need more of a balanced attack. You can't rely on your top 6 or truly in the Predators case, the top 3 to do everything. The top 3 plus Roman Josi to do everything. And yes, that was fine. I think it was fine for this year when you really, with all of the change and the, the new coach and the new system and everything like that, you kind of do need your top guys to kind of lead everyone. Carry everyone into the fight. I was willing to deal with that this past year, but I am going to be a lot more critical of this team if that happens again next year. Because you also look at a guy like Gus Nyquist, career year, age 34. The likelihood of him duplicating that very, very low, I think. So you can't only be relying on 4 guys to drive your offense. And again, Edmonton, that was kind of the problem in the first 3 games of the series because McDavid wasn't scoring and you've got their top guys weren't showing up. Finally, game 4, their offense just exploded and you did see, McDavid scored a goal, but then you also had 14 other guys who were on the score sheet. Darnell Nurse scored a goal. Come on, that is what you need to win playoff games.
Right. And when you look even at Florida, I loved the call when Nico Mikkola scored a goal because they were like, he never scores a goal. Can you believe it? And I'm like, first of all, his mama is listening. So let's tone it down a little bit. Yeah. But you do have to get all of that. You need the whole team going. And I saw a tweet online, and this one I did look up. Jameson Olive at Jameson Coop tweeted this out. This was ahead of game 4. So this was in the first 3 games. The third line for Florida of Losterinen, Lundell, and Tarasenko allowed 0 goals at 5-on-5 and scored 4 goals in 56-42 time on ice in those first 3 games. That is not a line of Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Gus Nyquist, my friends. And no disrespect, but you absolutely need your depth players. You need your bottom 6 guys scoring 4 goals in games if you want to get back to Stanley Cup contention. And I'm with you. Like, I will allow it for this season because Nashville, in this reset, you were relying a lot on young guys who are just getting used to the NHL. Like, obviously getting used to Bruno, getting used to a system. They're just getting used to scoring in the NHL, which is a different beast than scoring in the AHL, but in the next 2 or 3 seasons, Nashville has to get more out of their bottom 6. Their second line as well. I mean, more out than just their top line.
Really, their bottom 9.
Their bottom 9.
Yes.
So basically, yeah, anybody that's not named Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Gus Nyquist, or Ryan O'Reilly, you've got to get more out of them as this team gets closer to cup contention because you cannot rely on your big stars.
And this is partly why I have been against, very vocally against team like the Predators going out and spending a ton of money on Mitch Marner was a big topic of conversation.
Sure was. Yeah.
Thankfully, that has kind of died down because he doesn't plan on waiving his no movement clause, but it doesn't matter because he wasn't coming to Nashville anyway, people.
Yeah.
But the point is, people are like, oh, you go, you pay him $10 million to come play in Nashville and he's going to score all the goals. No, because we're seeing you can't rely on one guy to do it. To me, that doesn't solve one of the Predators' biggest problems, which is that you need more scoring from the bottom 9 and not the top 3. And so, I mean, because you're not gonna go sign Mitch Marner and put him on your third line. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I think that yes, while, you look at the top line, Ryan O'Reilly's not getting any younger. I understand that. And same with Nyquist as well. So I do think that you do need a legitimate 1C for the future, really. And that's why I would rather address that, in the draft or getting a prospect, for example, than I would like going out and throwing a ton of money at someone and overpaying for a center on whether it's on the free agent market or the trade market. I wouldn't want to overpay. To me, this is why, and I'm gonna say this again. I brought it up before. I think the Predators can go and they can sign a guy in free agency, a guy like Chandler Stevenson from Vegas. He's gonna immediately make your bottom 6 or really your bottom 9. He's going to immediately make them better. And you can spend probably less than $5 million to do it. Right. And to me, that's a no-brainer because it immediately makes your bottom 9 better. You put him with a guy like Luke Evangelista, for example. I truly believe that he could do for Evangelista what Ryan O'Reilly did for Philip Forsberg. And just like, if you can get him the puck, ooh, look out. And so I just think that that's why, it's not always the big, shiny, expensive piece that you want to be looking at in free agency. Sometimes it's these more under the radar guys that can still contribute scoring and are going to make that bottom 6 or bottom 9 better.
Yes. And I think you hit on a point when you're talking about Mitch Marner versus a Chandler Stevenson move this offseason. Timing is everything. You don't want to build a cup contending team with tons of cash until you are closer to being a cup contending team. And then you spend a lot of cash, flesh out what you have, develop what you have. And then it's worth $10 million, $9 million, $8 million, although $8 million, that just number makes people twitchy. Don't sign anyone for 8 years, $8 million. We can't handle it in Nashville. But that's when you go out and do it. Timing matters. And this is probably not the off season to go get yourself a $9 million player. You're not there yet. You don't know what you have to flesh out. Like you said, you don't know what you have to flesh out that bottom 9. Build that up and then go get the piece. Timing matters in building a cup contending team. And I think Nashville needs to learn that as they look ahead.
Exactly. I think to me, you look at now, granted, they're postseason run ended a little early, but I would look at a team like the Carolina Hurricanes, for example. For the last several seasons, fans, whoever, had been begging them, like, please make a big splashy move at the trade deadline. And they kind of held off, and, they would make moves, but none of them were like big names or,
Right.
big expensive names that were going to help, because they waited until the year that really this theoretically was Carolina's year, because they're going to have a lot of free agents, or they do now have a lot of free agents. They're not going to be able to re-sign all of them. This is kind of their last chance. I mean, that is why, when you're in that situation, you look ahead and you see you're going to lose a lot of your key pieces next year, or a few of them. That's when you go out at the trade deadline and you get Jake Gensel. Like
100%.
That's why you do that, or that's when you do that. And so I think that that's a perfect example of the timing's got to be right. The Predators are still a few years away. They're not going to be competing for a Stanley Cup this year. Whether they will admit that or not, I think it's just the reality of where we are right now. And that's fine. Like, of course, you're still trying to win. That doesn't mean, just because you're not ready to win a cup yet, doesn't mean that you're not trying to win games. I think that people make that misconception a lot, but I think that is a huge part of, like, that the timing piece, like you said, is very important, and I think a lot of times people lose sight of that.
I agree. Coming up, we're going to talk about finishing games and how important it's been in this Stanley Cup final, and what Nashville can learn from watching these first 4 finals games. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. Friends, summertime means baseball. Of course, we're wrapping up those NBA finals. The NHL finals are going on right now, and you can bet it all at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from the finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. We saw in Game 4, Connor McDavid, 4-point game Saturday. Sergei Bobrovsky, he did get chased from the goalie crease, but what do you think is going to happen in Game 5 in Florida? You can check out all of those odds, player props, and parlays at FanDuel ahead of Game 5. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Emma, we have talked about timing. We have talked about goaltending. We have talked about kind of fleshing out your team and not just relying on your stars. What is another thing that you really want Nashville to take away as they watch these Stanley Cup finals and these two teams competing?
Learn how to play with a lead.
Come on.
Now, granted, the Predators did get slightly better in that regard as the season went on, but early in this past season, that was a big problem. That was a big problem. You got to learn how to play with a lead. And I think if you look at Florida, just in the playoffs alone, they're 7-0 when leading after the first period, 9-0 when leading after the second period. And through the regular season and the playoffs this year, every game, they are perfect. 0 losses when they are leading through 2.
Wow.
That's I mean, I don't know what else you say about that. They're also in the playoffs, they're also 9-2 when they score the first goal. So I think that, scoring first is maybe less of the issue. I think that for the Predators, at least, you have to learn how to play with a lead and close out those games, especially the close games. Because I think if you look at, this playoffs, I think Florida, when in 1-goal games, like in 1-goal wins, I think Florida's record is 8-3.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got, between the regular season and the playoffs, when the game is decided by 1 goal, the Panthers have 27 wins. in that regard. And the only team that had more than they did were the New York Rangers, who won the President's Trophy.
Right.
So I think that tells you a lot about, knowing how to close out games. And I think that is just incredibly important. And we've seen it from the Panthers, both in the playoffs and throughout the regular season.
Yeah. And when you look at Nashville's postseason series, and I don't even like to bring this up because it was excruciating, but let's just talk about the game where Nashville had this game wrapped up. Had the game wrapped up, y'all. And then it went to overtime. And then all of a sudden, wah, wah, wah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how fun was that media, Emma?
Minus a million. That was not fun.
That was awful. And it was awful for the Nashville Predators, but it was symptomatic of something that they wrestled with off and on through the season. And I agree with you. Towards the end of the regular season, I think Nashville had kind of matured in a lot of ways. I think a lot of the younger players had gotten more used to what it takes to play with a lead, to close out a game. But that is one area where Nashville absolutely has to be consistent. And where if you want to be a champion, you've got to know not just how to play and come from behind, which is the thing that people focus on. Oh, you've got to learn how to come from behind and dig in and get back in the game. It is a skill set to play with a lead. There is a mental game to playing with a lead as well. And that one comes with a lot of maturity and a lot of practice. And it's not necessarily easy. And we've seen it I think, in this series with Florida and Edmonton, where there is an element of mental toughness that you can kind of see. Florida bounces back. Now, again, game 4. Let's set game 4 aside because not a lot of bouncing in game 4. But in the first 3 games that Florida won, in the times where Edmonton would score, it did not rattle Florida. When Florida got the lead, they did not take their foot off the gas. They continued to play their game. And there is an element of that. Yes, there is a tactical element of that, but there is a mental element of that. And I always love, we're huge Ted Lasso fans in our house. I love the simple but profound advice: be a goldfish. Be a goldfish. Forget that you have a 2-goal lead in a Stanley Cup final game. Forget it. Forget that you so far have shut out Connor McDavid. Forget that. You've got to play like this is a 0-0 game. And that comes with maturity, and that comes with practicing that mental skill.
100%. And I think that same advice still applies to Florida, like within this series. So I apologize. I can't remember who said it, if it was Mark Messier or PK Subban. Someone on the ABC broadcast for game 4 said, like, the best thing for Florida to do after game 4 is just completely throw it in the garbage bin.
100%.
It's not like, oh, what are the takeaways from this loss and what do we take from that? No, they dominated. This is one of those rare occasions where they absolutely dominated through the first 3 games of this series. If they go back, just completely erase game 4 from your memory. Throw it away. Don't look at, oh, here are the takeaways, whatever. Just go back and play like you did in games 1 through 3, and you will win this series. And so I think that, like you said, short memory, sometimes no memory, is better.
Do a Dory.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Do a Dory. Yeah. So there's a lot of takeaways for the Nashville Predators. And here's the thing. They are working towards these. We're interested, though, what are your takeaways for the Nashville Predators as you watch the Stanley Cup final series unfold? Let us know in the comment section of our YouTube video, or you can tweet us at LO_Predators. We'd love to hear what you have to say. We're also doing a mailbag episode later this week. Send us your questions on Twitter and YouTube as well. Before we sign off, though, Emma, let everyone know, where can they find you and where can they find your work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We hope you all have a great Monday. We'll be back tomorrow with an all new episode.